Hey, welcome. Thank you so much, Dr. Daniela Gomes, for joining us today. We have an incredible session. We're going to talk about tons of stuff here. First of all, let me introduce to you who I have with me. So I actually got introduced to Dr. Daniela Gomes through a blog post that she wrote about 7 years ago. And her blog post was about living in America as an Afro-Brazilian woman. And I actually do think that I read this blog post on Black Women in Brazil, the blog that Marcus Trave runs. And when I read this blog, it talked about her experiences and the expectations that she encountered when she met Black men in Brazil, Black women and Black men in America, Black women in America. And I love the ending of this piece because she really enforced that instead of people having these incorrect stereotypes about Black Brazilian women, they need to approach them as individuals and learn about the fight that Afro-Brazilian women have in Brazil. And so after reading that piece, I was like, you know what, I really need to meet her. And I think, given the fact that I was moving to Brazil as a journalist, somehow we got connected. And I actually think that my first time meeting her was actually on the train in Rio de Janeiro, if I'm not mistaken, or it could have been before then. So let me just introduce to you who she is. She is now, 7 years after she wrote that blog post that I read, and I think it became even viral. She is now a professor. She recently achieved her PhD from the University of Texas, Austin. And she's from Sao Paulo, and she got her PhD in African and African diaspora studies. Work to connect people in the African diaspora. And that's exactly why I'm doing these chats with Afro-Brazilians. Now, I understand that they are in English right now. In the future, I do plan to do chats in Portuguese, so just give me some time. But the idea is that in this time, in this middle of this pandemic, we need to be connecting people within the African diaspora. So I'm going to connect you to some amazing Afro-Brazilians, just like Daniela Gomes. And so her focus of her work is to build international bridges to fight racism around the globe. She does lectures. She's done TEDx lectures. She's participated in conferences. And now I want you guys to get to know her. So thank you so much, Daniela, for joining us today. I'm so happy to have you. I've known you in person, like physically as a person, probably for about 4 years, maybe 5 years.
Yeah, 5 years.
But actually, you know what? Even before I met you physically, I started following you on social media. I remember that.
The time I wasn't too active on my social media. Not that much anymore.
But first, before you start, I know this is just a very basic question. How are you? How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. I'm trying to survive the pandemic. Staying indoors, keeping myself safe. Sewing masks so I can go outside to buy my groceries. It's a new time. I think it's a new time in the world, and we have to become aware of that. Our sense of normality is going to change. Mm-hmm. And we have to, especially as Black people, not that we are different than anyone else for the pandemic, but as Black people, we have to be aware of our positionality in the world and how the new world that is coming after this is gone is going to affect us.
And I want to reinforce Daniela Gomes. Dr. Daniela Gomes is currently an assistant professor at Trinity College. And I did list her social media in case you want to follow her on social media as well. So my first question, and also if you guys have any questions along this chat that we have, please throw them in our comment section. I'm taking questions along the way. We're not waiting until the end. My first question is kind of for a Black person to hear this, a Black American person. It's going to sound a little weird. But my first question to you is, are you Black?
I'm black.
Yeah.
I know for sure that I am black.
Okay, so we got that out the way. You are black.
I'm
Have
black.
you always considered yourself black? And depending on the answer to your question, explain to me how you came to consider yourself black in Brazil.
Yes. It's hard for me to say no because I was a child. But like in Brazil, we have this notion that is it's not oppositional, but it's different than the US, right? So in the US, especially because of what happened after slavery with the one drop rule, if you have one drop of black blood, you are black, right?
Mm-hmm.
If we go all the way history after the octoroons and etc., you are black. Your parents are black. Your grandparents are black. Don't matter how you look like, you are black.
Mm-hmm.
In Brazil, the process of after slavery was different.
Mm-hmm.
We went through a process of whitening, right? Embranquecimento, as we say in Portuguese. So the idea was that because Brazil, and you know how I am very talkative, prolixus, so if you need, you cut me, okay? But Brazil was the last country in the world to emancipate slavery, but Brazil had much more enslaved African people going there than in the US. Only the state of Rio de Janeiro, where you used to live, received more African people than the whole US, right? One, because of the proximity. If you take the map, Brazil and the African continent are very close to each other. So they had much more transatlantic slave trade going to Brazil than coming here, right? So when slavery ended in Brazil, they had a problem, quote unquote, because they had a bunch of black people, people of African descent, both people who were enslaved and people who were already born in Brazil, people who were captive and people who were already born in Brazil, and they didn't know what to do with them. Because black people in 1888 was already a majority of the country. And Brazil followed the French Illuminism in that, considering that blackness was a shame and they had to erase it. But the way they decided to erase blackness was mixing people. So mestizaje, as we say in Latin America, but Brazil had a very particular case of mestizaje because Brazil paid for people from Europe, especially Italians, Germans, Polish people, and people from other places, and Asian people as well, like Japanese, to go to Brazil to get mixed with black people because they believed how lighter you would become, you could become white, right? So the idea is exactly the opposite. So you have two dark-skinned great grandparents. If one dark-skinned great grandparent get married to a white person, your mother is going to be like lighter, and you are going to be white in the end. So like their plan, I'm talking about 4 generations, but their plan was that in 100 years, Brazil would not have more black people. And their idea was that between 2012 and counting 50 years after that, Brazil would mostly be white, predominantly white. So what that says, one, that they don't know how to do math and how genetic works, because of course Brazil is still
very black.
still very black, still the second largest black country in the world, first outside of Africa. But also that in Brazil, how lighter you are not going to be considered black. And being black is so bad that even dark-skinned people, if they can, they don't want to be black, right? And over the stories. So one thing that we really hear from grandparents so at home, it's like you have to clean your race. You have to white yourself. Because like in my case, for example, right? You are light, but your hair is bad, quote unquote. You have bad hair, so you have to get a white husband. So your kids are going to get off of the bad hair. They are going to have the curse ends with you. Okay, so that is going from generation to generation. So a person like me or like you, I'm still here. Yeah, a person like you or like me or like you, who are light skinned with black featuring, it's not going to be called white, but not going to be called black in as well because of the color of our complexion. So when I was growing up, and one thing that is important to say, both my parents are light skinned, right? And
they're light skinned black people.
Light skinned black people, both of them. And my grandparents in both sides were not that light skinned. And on my mom's side specifically, I have like dark, brown skin, dark skin uncles and aunts, right? So I would know they were black, but I wouldn't know I was black. The name they call people like me in Brazil is sarará. Because I am like, oh, you are white with the complexion white, but with the afro hair and afro featuring, because I always had pink hair since I was a child. So when it's not that I was not suffering racism, but because nobody was naming me as black, I didn't.
Nobody said, Daniela, you are a black woman.
No, never. When I was a child, no. Not even to my mom. My mom knew her sisters were black, all her siblings who are darker than her, but she didn't know she was black. She didn't know her hair was bad. She was discriminated. They were very poor. Her father was like removed from places, but never because, okay, my father is black. Because it's bad in Brazil to call someone black. The person can get offended. Even dark-skinned people. So white people try to avoid the word black, or try it in the past, right? We are talking about a different time. So for me, it was like I was suffering racism. People were mocking my hair, mocking my lips, mocking my nose, saying
people made fun. When you say mocking you, you're saying people made fun of your feet.
Fun of me. Yeah, I was bullied my whole time in school because of my hair, because of my.
And this was black people or white people?
White people, white Brazilians, and I didn't know that was because I was black, you know. I was suffering, but I didn't know how to put a name on that, how to say this is racism, you know. And my family, it's working class, like low income and working class. So a lot of things in my family, especially to my siblings who are darker than me, was pretty much because we are poor. So their comprehension of, especially because if we go in a broad experience, Brazil, the leftists in Brazil trace everything to class without considering race. So poverty and growing up poor in Brazil, it's really growing up poor in the 80s, like, right? I
actually, this segues right into my next question. Just continue telling us about growing up in Sao Paulo, in the 80s, in the 90s, as a poor, now black Brazilian, and please continue talking about how you eventually became to see yourself as black, because I think it's
combine that. So what happened is, like, I make jokes. I make jokes about that. Like, I didn't grow up in a developing country. I grew up in a third world country, and I grew up poor in a third world country, in a poor neighborhood, like in the ghetto of a third world country, right? So my family, I'm descendant. I'm second generation migrant, right, from the northeast to São Paulo. Because my grandparents were not born in São Paulo. My grandparents were born, and two of them were born in Pernambuco. One was born in Bahia, in the country. So in the sertão, where is desert, very dry, right? People don't have a lot of resource in those country cities in the sertão of Nordeste. Anyone who already who have been to Brazil, to those areas, know the states are beautiful. There is a lot to see there, but there are very poor areas. And I'm talking about the 50s, right? 1950s. Mm-hmm. So both my grandparents, from my mom's side and my dad's side, they migrate from the Northeast to São Paulo. Mm-hmm. And my family is huge. I have a bunch of relatives, 10 uncles and aunts from both sides. And of course, the situation, and I just want to give a tip here. If people want to read about those period of time, read Carolina Maria de Jesus, Child of the Dark, or Quarto de Despejo, because she talks a lot about poverty. So it's the time when São Paulo is becoming urban, going from a rural industrial area to an urban city. São Paulo, for those who don't know, is a megalopolis. It's one of the largest cities, the biggest cities in the world. The state of São Paulo, which São Paulo city is the capital, has 45 million people. The metropolitan area of São Paulo has 20 million people, and São Paulo city has 11 million people. So I'm talking about a lot of people. And this process in the end of the 40s, beginning of the 50s, it's exactly when this process of fast-paced growing in urban spaces started in Brazil, right? Especially people moving from the north and northeast states, northern states, to southeast and south states. It's similar with, I cannot say similar to the Great Migration, because the Great Migration had another meaning, but as people were moving from rural south to developed north in the US, the idea was people moving from the rural north to develop south in Brazil. And that's a whole other story. And my parents were born like that. Like my mom jokes and say that they had a bad financial situation, because to have a bad financial situation, you have to have finances, and they didn't have any money. And they both got married like without anything. And so when I was born in a neighborhood named Jardim Maria Sampaio, which is in the south side of São Paulo. The south side of São Paulo can be compared to the south side of Chicago. I'm talking about danger.
Okay. Okay.
So at that time, but I have a few privileges in life. One of them is that I am the baby in my family. I have siblings who are very older than me, like 13 years. So when I was born, this financial situation of my family was a little bit better than for my siblings, for example, right? I had food at the table. I didn't have to concern if I was going to eat or not. Different from my parents and different like from my siblings, because my siblings could already they were basically teenagers, so they were working, they could help at home, and my father had a better job, they were older, so I was like growing up in a working class, but it was like a violent neighborhood, crimes everywhere, gangs killing each other, so sometimes we were like a body in the morning, another one, like people making jokes saying, okay, in that neighborhood, they kill one in the morning, they hold another one to kill in the afternoon, so they can give you time. And pretty much was real, like people that my family knew very well, like people who studied with my siblings, who used to play with my siblings in the streets, and then enter to alternative paths, and that took their lives and etc. And so I was born in 81. In the 90s, when I was like teenager years, right, 12. So things were very, very bad. We had a phase in Brazil in the late 70s, early 80s, with a lot of execution of Black people. by vigilantes that were hired by small business owners to kill. Also, in the 80s when I was born, it was still the military dictatorship. So a lot of militias were working and killing people as well, right? As working as vigilantes and killing people. So in the 90s, that was like the top, the south side of São Paulo. The whole periferia, and for those who don't know, periferia in Brazil is like the suburbs, but the suburbs in Brazil are poor, right? The centers are rich. And the whole peripheries of São Paulo are like that. But São Paulo is so huge, it's so spread out that if something is happening in the south side, nobody in the east side is going to care because we don't have it. So that was so terrible that the south side of São Paulo had 3 neighborhoods that was known as the Quadrilátero da Morte, so the death square. Because 4 neighborhoods, because those 4 neighborhoods had more deaths than some wars in the world. And
wow.
I can give you some links later so you can post for your followers. So that was the reality. And when this always anguished me a lot, because like imagine you were a child going to school, a poor school, no ball, no classes, like 50 people, 40 people in a class, you know, sometimes like people were like stealing sneakers, like robbing sneakers on the door at the fighting and things like that. Very like American movies, like I'm describing, like, I don't know, menace to society now. And the police entering your school, and you have to throw yourself under the chairs because like they could shoot somebody. So I am very sensitive. I have always been to a lot of things, even I didn't know how to name it. And that was making me sick. Literally, I was like, I don't want to go to school. I don't want to study anymore. I don't know why this happened to us. And for me, on my head was everything related to the neighborhood. Oh, I'm suffering this because I live in this neighborhood. If I leave this neighborhood, things are going to change because my neighborhood was my captive for me, you know, until hip hop. So the 80s was the beginning of hip hop in Brazil, 1984. And 88 to 89 was when hip hop started to like explode. And one of the main groups who started to do that, to become famous, right, especially in the poor peripheries of Brazil, it's from the south side of São Paulo. 2 of them are from the south side. And they started singing the south side in other neighborhoods of São Paulo in their lyrics. And this group is Racionais MCs. It's a famous group. They are still there. They are considered like the Brazilian public enemy, even because of the style, the denounced style that they had at the beginning. And they started to rhyme about racism, about crime, about like denouncing it and telling what was going on in our neighborhoods. And in the early 90s, like 93, 94, when they came, like they become like a boom, they explode to the whole country. It was like everything in our schools in the break during lunch was about hip hop. Teachers didn't know how to communicate with us because we were like talking hip hop 24/7, right? So we were listening to rap music in the class. We are like exchange mixtape that we used to create to each other, like recording the radio and changing and memorizing music and singing together, especially with other groups as well, but first primarily with Racionais, right? And even I was already in contact with that at school, but Racionais, especially because Mano Brown and Ice Blue are from the south side, they were talking about neighborhoods that I knew. So it was the first time, for your followers who have been to Brazil, nobody wants to go to São Paulo. Nobody think about Brazil. Nobody thinks about Brazil to go to São Paulo, because São Paulo is like New York, but without Times Square, right? Nobody thinks about, I want to be a tourist in São Paulo.
It's so true. So true.
People know about Rio, about Salvador, even about the Amazon, but about São Paulo, like going there to see gray buildings, they can see gray buildings here in New York or LA, right?
Mm-hmm.
So nobody's making music about São Paulo.
Mm-hmm.
The Garota de Ipanema, there is no Garota da Avenida Paulista. That doesn't exist. And so was the first time people were singing about things that I knew, about the word that I knew, about the São Paulo that I knew, right? They were talking about neighborhoods. It was not like a neighborhood that I knew when I was going, my mom was taking me to the doctor. That was when I was crossing the bridges. No, it was like places where I live, where I have been, where I had relatives. So that, and those same songs were talking about races. So I was 12.
And I'm just showing you guys pictures of hashtags and these right now, right here, just so you can get a feel for what kind of hip hop group they are. These are older images of them, so
yeah, that is a lot of them that are older. Some of them are younger. Our newest image. So
yeah.
When Hassan Eyes was singing, there was like a prompt in the identification, but they were not talking only about our neighborhoods and the violence we are suffering. They were talking about races. And they were clearly saying, and especially Mano Brown, it's brown skin, right? He's not dark skin, he's brown skin, like lighter than a dark person in Brazil. So this
is Mono. If you see my mouse, that's Mono Brown. I'm circling.
He is like my brother's complexion. So when he was talking about being black, I could identify myself. I was like, uh-oh. So now there is a name for everything I have been suffering. Why people are calling me names, why people are like making fun of me, bullying me, why my life sucks in this neighborhood with the police entering my
But
street.
how were you when you made this connection between Mono Brown's
12.
lyrics? You're like, how old were you?
I was 12. I was 12 years old. Yeah. So from that moment, I was like, okay, family, let me tell you something. You guys are all black. Okay, family meeting. Let's have a family reunion here. You were black. You were black. You were black too. You were black too. I don't care. How do you look like? You are black. And that caused a lot of trouble because, like, I was already out.
What was the reaction? How did your family react? Like your mother, your father, your sister, and even your brother?
They thought I was annoying because I was annoying. I became an activist that moment, right? And I always say that my first spot of activism, my first place of activism was my family. Because I was like, they thought I was like a teenager. I literally went from Bon Jovi posters and Tom Cruise posters to take everything and say, we are all black here, and start wearing like 100% black shirts. Black is beautiful. Literally, like, it's not a metaphor. Literally, I started like, okay, black is, and my cousins, I had cousins who stopped talking to me. I had and
they stopped talking to you.
Oh yeah, some of them don't talk yet, but I don't miss them.
Also, you guys, we have 12 people online right now. If you have any questions for Daniela, please write them in the comments. We're taking questions during the interview. So please, if you have any questions about her experience in Sao Paulo,
if you guys don't ask, I will be talking.
She will talk.
I will talk until 10 o'clock. So yeah, so was pretty much, it's not that it was a shock, but imagine I am 12 years old. I have parents who are in their 40s and siblings who are like on their 18, 20, 22, 25. And I am like bossing them. Pretty much is that what was going on, Like I was like telling these people, hey, you have to change your behavior. You have, because one thing that you who have been in Brazil and others who have is like a lot of light-skinned black people in Brazil internalize racism. They deny their blackness and they internalize racism and they reproduce that. And my family was not different. My grandpa was extremely reproducing racism, saying that it loud, like telling us don't get married black people because you have to clean your race, you have to improve. And my family, his kids, were teaching that to the second generation, which is my generation, like the third generation actually. So it's, imagine that if the Brazilian government was saying that in the early 20th century, imagine how my grandfather, who was a black man from the Northeast, illiterate, poor, would react, especially being very discriminated. Because nobody says that, but the Northeast of Brazil is very racist. Even most people are black and brown, right? And when I say brown, I'm talking about light-skinned black people. So my grandfather was very discriminated for being black, forbidden to get married to someone because he was black, removed from places because he was black. So he knew he was black, but he started that self-hating and reproducing that to other dark-skinned black people. And saying, like, literally. So all those aggressions that white people tell black people, light-skinned black people in Brazil also reproduce because they don't see themselves, right? So that's so normal, not so normal, of course, right? Situation is different. But like, that's why sometimes you see someone like being arrested for racism in Brazil, or being at least published, shamed for being racist. And you look at the person and say, this person is black. Or, like, does he know that he's black? Because people really, it's like being brainwashed. People really internalize it. So it's kind of uncomfortable for people having you remind, like, okay, your lips, they are not big because someone threw a rock on you when you were a child. They are big because you are black. Oh, it doesn't matter if you stop eating to lose weight. Your body is still going to be big because you were black. And all these things, like, you can straighten your hair as much as you want to, you are still black, right? Things that don't end blackness, but they can amenize blackness in Brazil. Like me, when I used to have my hair straightened, like on a perm, people were not going to tell me you were white. They were going to tell me you have a foot in the slave house or a foot in the kitchen, which is in Brazil is an expression to say you are black. You have black blood. But now that I am, not now anymore, but when I was still in Brazil 7 years ago, when I was natural in the streets, people were saying, if you straighten your hair, you are white. And then you have to decide, or I am black or I am white. Because if I had a foot at the slave house because of my hair, even when it was straightened, right, in a perm, and now that is natural, you say, if I straight, I am white, please decide, because like you guys are confused. I am pretty sure what I am.
A lot, when I was, so in Brazil, I heard the term socially white. Would you define that when someone straightens their hair, what else, or wear certain clothes? Would you define that as them trying to be socially white, or is that just that?
It depends of the person. I think there are people who just think they are white, who look at themselves and they don't see difference between them and Gisele Bündchen. I saw like a guy from Santa Catarina, I think, defining himself as Nordic, as if he was Slav or something like that, a Viking. And you look at the guy's hair, and his hair is very, very straight, unlike a Brazilian blowout. And I was like, and he put a picture. This was this past week. He's not black, but he certainly is not from Finland.
Okay.
And he put a picture of him and a really European, like Slavic girl. And I was like, this guy really thinks he look like this girl. Doesn't he have a mirror? But it's possible, because it's like, and that goes not only in Brazil. We have the Dominican Republic, that things like that happen as well. Other places in Central and South America as well, right? We have different, it's because races manifest itself differently everywhere. So through hip hop was how I became an activist. And of course, at first I was pretty much, I was a teenager, so I didn't have that much space to go, but I became going to events and participate. When I started, there wasn't a lot of light-skinned Black people being visible. It's not that there wasn't light-skinned activists, but I didn't know. Of course, nobody in my family was an activist as well.
You didn't have access to activists.
Yes. So I started to go to activist events, to hip-hop concerts. My father was very conservative. And another thing, I come from a Christian background. I grew up Baptist. So that's another thing also, because my parents were scared that I could change religions and go to Afro-Brazilian Afro-Brazilian religious practice, right? And we know now how evangelicals in Brazil are very, very racist, and there is no other word to say. So I grew up, and after I went to college, that became more prominent in my life, because then I started to do activism through my work. And I went to college. Then when I graduated, I went to work to Zumbi, which is the only Black college in Brazil. I worked to Zumbi for 6 to 7 years straight, and then freelancing to them. So a lot of people in the US who knows me because of my former job. Jumping
Actually,
from there.
Before you keep going. We do have a question from our audience. Before we get to that question, hold on.
If you guys ask, I stop talking.
Just a brief question. You said that you discovered your identity through hip hop. And traditionally, hip hop, at least in the early stages of hip hop, it's been very male, very masculine. Was the audience for hip hop in Sao Paulo mainly masculine, or were there women? And is it atypical for a woman like you to have been so impacted by hip hop 25 years ago?
It's typical, but it doesn't mean it's not male. Hip hop in Brazil is still nowadays is very masculine. And there is this notion of Black hyper masculinity that is still part of hip hop in Brazil, very strong, even stronger than here. Especially because the market is not big, so it's very sexist, very protective. Brazil is a very machista country, right? Very macho-centric country. And so this is a long conversation, but just trying to answer in a brief. When we were there starting, we pretty much have to perform masculinity to be accepted. So a lot of girls, my generation, like we could not go to a concert and be like a groupie and say, "Hey, hot, gorgeous," as you go to BTS concert. I don't know, from our time, I don't know, Boys to Men, whatever. We couldn't do that in a rap concert. You could not go with short clothes. You could not say the artist was hot or anything. You should be there sag pants, big shirts.
Oh gosh.
Yes, you have to be very, very we used to say in Portuguese, mina mano, right? A girl bro.
Mm-hmm.
Have to be like very broad to be part of. A lot of. You talk to a lot of them from my age. That's what we had to perform. Some of them
Mm-hmm.
really had like really were discovering their sexuality as lesbian women, but a lot of them, like myself, was straight, but we just had to perform that in order to be accepted, because supposed we were not supposed to be there.
Mm. Okay.
So if you are going there, you have to behave, and behave in the sense mean like not express femininity, because most women were actually backstage or doing back vocal, like the girlfriend of the artist, not the artist. So
Mm-hmm.
most of my reference in the 90s, most of them were men. I didn't
Okay.
question sexism on hip hop until I started my master's, my PhD.
So we have a question from Aminata Kaba. Great question. She says, I'm wondering what solidarity for Black women can look like internationally. How do I uplift my Black sisters in Brazil from the US and vice versa? This is
Hey,
a great question.
Aminata. Yeah, it's a great question. Hey, Aminata, nice to talk to you. Thank you for your question. First thing that we need to know is that that's already happening. It has been happening for a long time now. If we take the work of Lélia Gonzalez, Sueli Carneiro, Jurema Werneck, famous people here, famous scholars like Angela Davis, Patricia Hill Collins, Kimberly Crenshaw, and other people have been to Brazil doing that back and forth, right? Especially because of the size of Brazil in South America, in Latin America, right? Brazil has a huge Black population and a strong movement of Black women, even before the name Black feminism was there. Right, so Benedita da Silva has been here several times. Her book was published in English. So that is already happening, right? And also a connection between Afro-Brazilian activists and scholars and Afro-Caribbean activists and scholars and Afro-Latinx in Latin America as well. But so the connections in a broader way, in a sense, a more general approach, I think now is the moment because we have social media. So first, understand here your place of privilege. And it's hard to say that because people are going to say, but I don't have privilege. I'm a Black woman in the US, right? And we are in the bottom of the pyramid. But you are still American. And outside of the US, you are not perceived as a Black American or an African American. Your passport talk first. So in certain moments in Brazil and other developing countries, you are going to be treated even better than a white person from the country, depending on the situation. Because we're American. So we are talking about the imperialist and colonialist mentality here, right? The global South looks to the global North as superior. But more than that, it's to understand that there is I will try to be cautious, I'll say, but it's because it's important. Like there is a movement of creating rivalry between African American women and other foreign women, especially foreign Black women, and other foreign women of color coming from men and sexes, by saying that they are not going to date Black women in this country, African American women, because they are angry, because they are too feminist, and now people are going to cancel me. But they are angry, they are too feminist, they are too independent, they are blah, 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 blah. Right? You guys know that. The myth of the controlling image, if you are going to be academic, of the angry Black women or the Black professional lady. So they use that to date with people outside of the country And that includes not only Black Brazilian women, but Black Latinx women, but also white women from other countries who are just not white here, but they are white. Let me tell you, they were white back there. But they use that, and you can date with whoever you want. I don't care. I don't mind your life. I care about my business. But don't use that excuse to oppress Black women here in this country. So they use that an excuse to oppress African American women, to say, hey, you see why you are single? Why I'm going to marry this Brazilian, this Mexican, this, because you are too feminist. You are too demanding. You are angry. And that's a point. And unfortunately, a lot of African American women buy that idea and see Black women from Brazil and from other places as rivals, as enemies, as someone that is oppositional to them, right? When actually, if an African American man does half of they do here with someone in Brazil, I don't know what they would face, because like we don't take that BS, right? So I am very spontaneous, but what I'm trying to say is that there is this mentality, this idea of submission, of being submissive, of not being feminist, not being educated. And I want to know, who are those Black women? Of course, we have poverty in Brazil. Of course, we have women in Brazil who are dealing as sex workers because they have to support their family. But we also have here, right in the corner in Hartford, or New York, or Chicago, whatever. So I think it's to understand that the place from where we stand is very similar. That's the first step we have to create our connections. We are both the bottom of the society. We are both single, like in a sense, not single. We are both lonely. We are both dealing with loneliness, not only loneliness of not having a partner, but people look into us and say, you are strong, so you don't need me. You are strong, so I can go through you as if I was in a truck, without consider your feelings, your emotions, because you are too strong. You don't need a man in the house. I will not take care of my child because you can take care of your own. And that's happening in the whole diaspora, right? So this is the first step. We have to recognize our privilege. We have to recognize our difference, but we have to look to what connects us. There are things that are connecting us, and the things that are connecting us related to race and gender, in this case of Black women, but it's primarily to race, are bigger than that. And once you put that in the paper and you start to say, oh, but the US is like this, Brazil is like this. The US is like this, Brazil, you are going, or Canada, or whatever, you are going to say, Jesus, both.
But here's the thing. I feel like the connections that are being made and the support.
I don't know if I answer her question.
Well, maybe I'll help you answer it. But I do feel like these connections that are made across the diaspora between Black women, they seem to be concentrated in academic circles. Is there a way for this solidarity to spread out throughout different classes, throughout
social media? For me, it's social media.
Social media. Okay. So
but that's my opinion, because I think that at first was academic because it was the resource we had. Of course, for an academic woman, was easier to navigate those two words.
Yes.
Because both here, even in this country, right? We're not talking about low-income Americans, Black Americans. They don't even have a passport.
That's true.
How they are going? They know about Puerto Ricans or Dominicans because people immigrate here. People migrate here, but like, how are they going to know about Brazil, except for what they see on TV, or the Brazilians who are discriminating then here, treating Black Americans poorly because they are white in Brazil and they think they are white here, right? So they don't have a passport. Our schools here, and here I am talking about politics, but okay, our schools here don't teach kids well. Right? We know that. Our school system here sucks. For public school. They suck in Brazil. It sucks in Brazil as well. But what I'm saying is like geography. capitals of other countries. People used to ask me if the capital of Brazil is Rio de Janeiro
It's not. No.
or Buenos Aires. It's Brasilia, guys. How you know? So how are they
But
going
actually,
to know?
here's a good question. Someone asked, can you give us some resources or pages to follow? What are there any social media? Obviously, you guys have to follow Daniela Gomes. Daniela Gomes, PhD on Twitter. She's always giving people information about what's going on in Brazil and the diaspora. So start with her, but any other pages or accounts to follow?
I'm trying to think pages in English, right?
Exactly. That's another issue. Language.
Yes, because the language is a barrier. That's another thing to help with solidarity. Learning Portuguese,
learn another language.
Learning the language. Yes, it's a lot of Brazilians Black Brazilians are trying to speak English, but it's still a barrier. But learning the language, at least the basics to start a dialogue, is good. And not going with imperialist mentality. So if I'm going there to save, don't buy the savior syndrome that we call white savior syndrome. But unfortunately, a lot of Black Americans also buy it and go there with the mentality, I'm going to help, I'm going to make change. No, just go as you, as if you were going to your neighborhood. But anyway, saying that, there is a lot of Gelede's website. Sometimes they post some things in English. And Gelede's also have a Twitter, Facebook page, Instagram. Criolla also posts things in English. Sometimes they have some reports. There are some activists like Winnie Bueno. She's a Black feminist from the south of Brazil. She posts in Portuguese, but she speaks English fluently, very well.
Thank you. I might have to hit her up for an interview.
Yes, she created a project that is very special, named Winnie Teca, where she started calling it the book Tinder, where a Black person asks for a book and someone donates to that person. And any Black person can just go there, say, hey, I need Angela Davis, Women, Race, and Class. And someone goes to that person inbox through the page on Twitter, Winnie Teca. They donate the book. And she started on her page, very simple name, Tinder dos Livros, or Book Tinder. And then Twitter invited her. Twitter itself invited her. Twitter directors invited her to come to Houston to create the Winnie Teca. So this project is amazing, and it's a huge way to create. A lot of Brazilians still use more Facebook than Twitter. Facebook is still huge in Brazil. Twitter is not. It's more like a young and intellectual tool.
Yes.
Most like mid. I don't like this term middle class because I just think we are people with credit cards. But anyway, people with more access, right?
That is true.
You are going to find more Brazilian intellectuals, writers, artists, people who already have access to a lot of things. If you want to meet like regular folks from Brazil, the thing is Facebook.
And Facebook groups. I know quite a few Black Americans who met before they even came to Brazil. They met Afro-Brazilians through Facebook groups.
Yeah, through Facebook groups. And one thing about us in Brazil is that we like to talk, as you guys can notice. And we are very generous in like trying to talk to foreigners. So even they are going to call you gringo, it's not with the same sense that is here in the US. Any foreign person in Brazil is considered a gringo. It's not pejorative over there. It's not bad language. But like we try to help the person to learn the language. We give we are, even those who don't speak English are going to give 100% to try to help each person. So it's a good way to learn.
So this actually segues perfectly into my next question. I would like you to briefly, hold on. Oops, I'm trying to share I would actually like you to briefly talk about your experience as a Black woman in America, and base it off of, can you tell us about this blog that you wrote in 2013?
Oh my God. That has been a while.
Sorry.
It's been a while. No, no, no,
Sorry.
no. I'm
Black
not going to
Brazilian
say.
woman in America.
Yeah.
And I would like to know, you wrote this in 2013. So what I would actually like to know, first of all, explain to us your experiences of living as a Black Brazilian woman in America, and if you think the attitudes towards Black Brazilian women have changed in America. Like, you've been there for 6-7 years. So have there been any changes or evolution in the way people view Black Brazilian women?
Yeah, unfortunately not.
Oh, no.
No. But what I want to say, it's, first of all, my blog, I stopped writing it during my PhD because I didn't have time. So it's very outdated, right? This particular test, I want to tell what place I am coming from first. I always have been willing to visit the US, to come to the US since I was a child. And as a Black person in Brazil, my perception of the US was the perception of most Black people in Brazil. One, the perception of solidarity among Black people. Two, the perception of wealth, right? Black people with money and in better conditions than Black Brazilians, because for those who don't know, between your followers, among your followers, most Black Brazilians, we don't have any Black millionaire, few, couple,
Very,
10, like 5, right? No Black president of companies or etc., right? We never had HBCUs in Brazil. Education for Black people in Brazil is very recent. Vote for illiterate people in Brazil is less than 30 years. So a lot of data that I can share later with whoever contacts me. So pretty much, the information we didn't have information about Black Brazilians first. We didn't learn that in school or anything like that. Until early 2000s, the all information we had came from hip hop, especially for urban people. And so I came from this place of admiration. I came from this place of looking at the US as like the rich cousin that you have, right? So for me, first, I didn't come here first in 2013. I lived in Georgia in 2008 in Atlanta for 2 months. Yeah, I came to study English.
Atlanta was your introduction to Black people in America?
Yes, I was in a chocolate city. Like, I was like, people, fun story, people in the travel agents asked me, why Atlanta? Nobody goes there. Which is not true. It's full of Brazilians. They're packed with Brazilians, but not like for exchange programs. A lot of immigrants. So I went to Atlanta, and I was like, my experience was very symbolic to me because I saw poverty for Black people. And that made me cry because I was like, if they are 40 years ahead of us, thinking about civil rights, right? Law, of course, now I know as a scholar that I cannot measure those things. At 26, I didn't know that. But like, if they are ahead of us, like 40, 50 years, and they are still like this, there is no hope for us. Because like, now that we are talking about affirmative actions, now that we are, and like, I am the only person in my family with a PhD. Right? Like, my sister was the first person in my family to get a master's. So, and we are the only two to have masters. Few people in my family have college degrees. So, thinking about that and seeing poverty here in people on drugs, and Black people on drugs, on poverty in the streets, was very sad to me because I was like hopeless. So that was my place, but I was still in a place of admiration because I only spent 2 months there. I didn't have a life there, right? So I went back to Brazil, and I came back 5 years later. And again, about my job at Zumbi, I always worked with African Americans, always, because Zumbi was a Black college, so all the delegations that were going there were Black, right? And of course, I didn't have an idea of what people were thinking about Brazilian women here. We know that most people will think Brazil is just butts and like Botox and things like that. We know that, but I didn't know that Black people used to think like that too.
Mm.
That for me was things for white people, white
Mm.
Americans, or white old Europeans and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I was always in contact. And from time to time, I used to listen to some things like very naughty, if I can say, very derogatory, but I didn't associate because I was naive, actually.
Mm-hmm.
My experience 2013 was an experience of living in a white, in a major white city,
Mm-hmm.
which is Austin, Texas, where right with only 6% of Black population, in a
Mm-hmm.
predominantly white school
Mm-hmm.
with only 4% of Black population.
Mm-hmm.
And being a foreign, arriving there and understanding that you are Black, but you are not our Black, right?
Mm-hmm.
One, nobody sees me as Brazilian. Nobody know I am Brazilian until I say I am Brazilian.
Mm-hmm.
People think I am anything else less Brazilian.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people don't even know I'm not African American per se. To start,
Mm-hmm.
only when I talk because of my accent. But people think I am from Ethiopia, Eritrea. Now here is Puerto Rico and Dominica.
Wow.
Everything, because they associate being Brazilian with being white. Right, not white, but Latinx, which means white in Brazil. So they don't see a lot of Black people from Brazil.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, it was already a moment of chaos.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went to Brazil for November for the Black History Month.
Mm-hmm.
And I was invited by my previous job, which was Zombie. And I went with a delegation of 30 people from the US.
Oh, wow.
Mostly for retired directors of HBCUs, people that I knew, people who I have full consideration, friends, people who have been to Brazil before, and etc. And had few people who haven't been to Brazil. And old enough to be my grandpa, my father's.
Mm-hmm.
And one of these men harassed me.
Oh my gosh.
And he grabbed me and tried to kiss me.
Mm-hmm.
And that destroyed me because I was already like in a movement of adapting myself to a new city, a new place. I just had moved to Texas. And that harassment for me was so violent. And I was working. And in that day, I learned that men and other men in the group were harassing students over there and approaching people, giving room numbers. And I had like a breakdown while I was working. I was destroyed. And I am, you know me personally, but I am very professional. I almost try not to show emotions when I am working. I keep distance, especially working with the audience that I work like in Brazil, which were artists and things like that. I try to keep my job very well. And I was so destroyed that I couldn't work. I had to translate to Reverend Jess Jackson that day. And I was like, I couldn't talk. I barely could talk in English. And later on, I know I'm taking a lot of time, but later on, a person who was there, a woman, Black woman, because I came back and I talked about, and I was like so devastated. And I was like, can't you guys see how these men are treating us? Like, what makes they think that they can go to Brazil and treat women like that, right? And then one of the girls who were in the group, she's an African American woman, she sent me a link for a documentary, which is frustrated, angry Black American in Rio, in Brazil, whatever. It's a terrible documentary. But in this documentary, there was a man who stays in Rio de Janeiro. He is an older man as well. He stays in Rio de Janeiro and he promotes a lot of sexual tourism events there. And when I talk about sexual tourism, I want to be clear. I don't have any problem with people going on dates outside of their country. My problem is when you make a counter to sex touristic destination, because you contribute with human traffic, you contribute with a lot of other things. So he used to do that, and he used to go to these events pretending he was these events in São Paulo. He lives in Rio, so he promote these parties in Rio, and he used to go to these events in São Paulo, pretending he was a businessman, bringing delegation of businessmen from the US without saying they were there looking for prostitution. Right. And then after that, I start to realize that a lot of things that I heard before that situation in other years, men approaching me, asking me if I would take care of their sons, if they send their sons to Brazil while I was doing translation to my boss and things like that. It was because they thought like they just could go to Brazil and in the package would be like the beach, the caipirinha, and a black woman. And then I start to study that. And then I wrote, of course, those pieces because I start to hear a lot of black women here bashing this. Oh, you know how they dress. You know, like how they walk in bikinis. Or black men here as talking to me normally, flirting, not even flirting, but like normal conversation. And the moment I say I am Brazilian, they change the subject. So they start to approach me in a more sexual way and tell me, hey, I want to go to Brazil before I get married and things like that. So in a point that disrupt my date life, and so I have been harassed by Uber drivers, black people. So that was primarily that harassment when I was very, very abused while I was working by a man old enough to be my father, motivated that specifically article that you were talking. I want to make that clear. And after that, that started to come to my mind over and over again. I wrote a book chapter that was published by scholar Gladys Waldorf Freeman. I can send you the link. And I talk about this experience of solidarity and how we have to understand that exactly what I talked about to Aminata, like we are coming from the same place. The same kind of controlling images that apply to black women here apply to black women in Brazil. And as I started to learn, how the Brazilian government started to sell us in the 70s as part of the touristic packages for Brazil. Sell black women, sell sexual. They don't do that anymore. But at the end, as we know, the image that they associate to Brazil is the image of the black women, especially mixed black women. Not mixed, but like it's the image of the mulata. The word that comes from mule, but that this woman who is voluptuous, who is like, so pretty much is not me because I am very petite. I don't have curves, but pretty much I am the image of the woman who is going to be available for tourists to go there and have pleasure. The caipirinha, the beach, and the woman, the black.
If indeed the government sold this image in the 70s and 80s, and obviously African Americans themselves have promoted this image, what is preventing us from getting away from this image? Like, why hasn't it changed in the last 7 years? Like, or what do I have to do as a journalist to change this image? I mean, I'm trying to write articles on different things, but I'm like, if it hasn't changed, if the perspective of Afro-Brazilian women in America hasn't changed, why am I doing this?
I say it hasn't changed because I am still approaching it in the same way. Dating apps for me are a nightmare. Because I never know. I know, of course, but like what I'm trying to say is like, what is this guy real intention? Is he interested on me as a person to know me, or he has the image that of the Brazilian whore? I'm cursing on TV. The Brazilian sexual active person, right? Who is available for him to have pleasure but not for him to marry. Right.
Mm.
Another thing is how I deal with my own sexuality.
Mm-hmm.
Am I dancing too sexy? If I have sex with this person, and
Mm-hmm.
is this guy going to think I am like easy right because I am Brazilian?
Mm-hmm.
And even all Brazilian women are perceived as easy, as more like party girls and things like that. But
Mm-hmm.
association to prostitution has a specific target, and that's black.
Mm-hmm.
So I have talked with, I have posted that several times, and a lot of white Brazilians say, I don't feel like that. Of course, you are white. That's not
Mm-hmm.
going to be that heavy, because we know when we talk about like intersection of oppressions, right? We are
Mm-hmm.
at the bottom of the pyramid. So
We actually, oh, sorry.
go
I'm
ahead.
sorry.
No, go ahead.
We actually had a very another question from someone. Actually, you didn't answer my question. What can I do to change this
Oh,
perception of a Brazilian woman?
I think first of all is to change your own perception.
Okay.
Not not this global us, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Mm-hmm.
is to change our own perception. Is to learn that we are people,
Yeah.
right? And we are a very different culture, but we have a lot of things in common. Brazilians are very affectionate. So
Very.
sometimes people are going to hug you, but they don't want to date you. It's
That is
just
true.
a hug.
Yes, it's just a hug.
If someone meets you and give you a kiss on the cheek, they are not trying to get you into the bedroom. It's just like the kiss. So those things are cultural manners that you have to learn. Same way I had to learn not hugging people first time when I moved in here, right? You have to adapt yourself. The other thing, it's very being open mind about learning that, again, Americans, even those who are Black Americans, are in a position of privilege. So a lot of people in Brazil, especially women, right? Because the opposite movement is happening of Black African American women going to Brazil and dating African American Afro-Brazilian men. It's okay, it's happening, but it's not as intense as African American men going to search for women. And but understanding that you are in a place of privilege,
Mm-hmm.
and your place of privilege determines that once you get there, people are going to look at you with other eyes. You have been to Brazil, you know our community, especially low income communities, right? You know that people think everyone in the US live like Hollywood movies. We don't know there is
Mm-hmm.
Black people, poor Black people here.
That is so true. That's so true.
And
Because they
it's
actually the movies that show poor Black people never arrive in Brazil. I learned that.
they arrived in the 90s with hip hop.
Okay.
They arrived
Okay.
like Menace to Society was there. The other one, Boys in the Hood.
That came out. I mean, that came out in a movie, or y'all were just trading
No,
tapes.
that came off on TV. Set it off. They were older. They were older. The romantic ones as well, like Brown Sugar and all those things. But the thing is that the idea of Prince Charming translates to Black Prince Charming. When women in Brazil think about the idea of get married with a gringo to have a better life, and it's not all women, you know. I'm talking about specific groups, okay? There are a lot of women who, if a foreign person go talk to them, they are going to say, go to hell. I don't like you.
Like that.
I don't like you. I know why you are here. But it's like, especially for low income women and who have this idea, I'm going to get married to a gringo. And again, not gringo in the sense of American, not foreign. And have a beautiful life and everything. The first idea is the white man, Brad Pitt, whatever, DiCaprio. No, who is the popular now? I don't even know who is Jason Momoa. I don't know who is a white man that people like now.
Yeah.
But like one of those. Okay, so I have been comparing a lot to 90 Day Fiancé. because those guys are losers here. Nobody in this country will date them.
Mm-hmm.
But they go outside of the US and they find like girls who fall for them and come here. Some of them have records. Some of them live with their mothers and cats. They are just ridiculous. Like no one with sanity would date them in the US. So the first is this white prince, but the black prince, especially for black girls, is very similar because we see side eggs on TV, or Morris Chestnut, or I don't know who else, but Tupac for my generation. For my generation.
That brings me to our next audience question from Latoya. She says, can you discuss colorism in Brazil and the colorism amongst the diaspora that you have experienced, if any?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Guys, I am a light-skinned black woman. And first thing that I learned as a light-skinned black woman is that I have to know my privilege. Mm-hmm. And I have to know the place, or let me say the chess piece that I am for white people. Mm-hmm. I have to. Mm-hmm. And in Brazil, that is very particular because it's not that the discussion about black activism or blackness in Brazil is new. It's not, has happened since slavery. Mm-hmm. But prominent black activists are more here, like they are more recent, right? Mm-hmm. And I know that, especially now in these past years before Bolsonaro, where there was a lot of pressure from civil social movements to have black people on TV, on ads and novellas and things like that, it's easier for them to have a black woman like me than to have a dark-skinned black woman. Mm-hmm. Because I can feel the quota, right? They can say, no, I have a black person, look at her. Mm-hmm. But I am not offensive to the white standard of beauty, even I am not considered. And I want to make clear that I am not considered beautiful in Brazil, okay? I'm ugly in Brazil. People don't think I'm beautiful in general. But going back.
We might have to discuss that. We have to go back to that. But okay.
Yes, going back to the point, it's easier for them to have a light-skinned model in Brazil to represent, and that is very important from the US concept, right? Not that we don't have colorism, it's because for a long time, colorism in Brazil meaning you could not be black. You could decide what the hell you were. You know? I don't want to be black. I am morena, I am mulata, I am chocolate, I am coffee, I am caramel, I am truffle, whatever. Right? And that was okay because people avoided saying the word black as if the word black was bringing you a curse. You know? But in the US, where you don't have a way, or you didn't have in the past, now you can say you are biracial. What is the same thing of the racial democracy in Brazil, but that's another conversation. But in the US, where you can say you cannot decide what you are black. Kiratiana, you are black.
I'm black.
If you get married to a white guy and you have a baby, your baby's black.
Yeah.
Right? So colorism works. In which sense? It's easier to have a Zoe Saldanha to play Nina Simone, who was a dark-skinned black woman fighting against colorism. Without this woman even, like, without Zoe Saldanha even notice how offensive is that, then to have a dark-skinned black woman playing, like Micaela, what is her name? That beautiful woman, Micaela something. Who did
I know what movie you're talking about.
I won't remember, but like she really looks like Nina Simone. You look at her feature and say, oh my gosh, I don't even know if Nina Simone's daughter looked like her as much as Micaela. But like it's easier to have, and when you have is one Lupita, who are you going to play as dark-skinned black women? Lupita Nyong'o. And for that other character, Lupita Nyong'o. And for that other, Lupita. So, like, you have one just to post that. Doesn't mean races ended or black or light-skinned black women are not affected by racism, because we are. But what we have to understand is that this is a game that races as a system created, not only for us to be divided, yes, but for us as light-skinned black people to be confirmed. Because
So actually,
once I am at the space, I don't make space to anyone else, because I am there.
well, this is actually a good connection to the same subject. Danny Styles asked, so do you believe that colorism within the Black community doesn't still exist?
Yes, it still exists.
Okay.
It still exists. And we, guys, we are talking about that. Like, we see that all the time on watching reality shows, watch on TV, watch like someone always asks the same question. I think she's Kale who asked, like, last time we had like pop artists who are dark skinned. Like, we don't have it. Look at Beyonce. Look at, like, now we have Lizzo, SZA, and everything. But like, what makes someone being popular? The chances for we as light skin doesn't mean we are not going to be suffer racism, to be impacted by racism. We will. But I think the chances for us to get spaces, and the thing is, when they put us, they don't need to put anyone else. And what happened is, like, most of times we keep silent.
And we cannot keep silent.
And that's the point. We cannot keep silent. And that's the point. That's the point. Like, okay, I am in this room. I represent the Black delegation, the Wakanda delegation, as representative of the Wakanda delegation. I would like to know, where are the other Black people here? Why didn't we invite a dark-skinned Black woman to talk? But I don't do that. And why I don't do that? Because, as we say in Portuguese, safarinha é pouco, meu pirão primeiro. I don't know how to translate. But if you have just a slice of cake, if I ask another Black person to the room, I have to share my cake. And I don't want to share that.
So I want to remind people, if you have any questions, please type them in the comment section on the side. We're going to trying to wrap down, but, you know, me and Daniela, we can go for 2 hours.
Yeah, nah. Poor people watching. Is there still people there watching this?
So Daniela, let's talk about Dr. Daniela Gomes. Let's talk about your time at the University of Texas, Austin. Can you tell us what did you do your dissertation on? And just tell us about your experience living in Texas, living in Austin, Texas. How was it?
Okay, my dissertation was, of course, about hip hop. And I didn't say that as the first, but I always say that to everybody. Hip hop was my first love. And it's my oldest. The love that it's longest. Like, it's going to endure forever. All the other men in my life just left, but hip hop is still there. So I'm very very passionate about hip hop because of my journey, of course, and what that represents in Brazil. So for my master's in Brazil, what I investigated was the influence of American Black music in the formation of Black identity in São Paulo specifically. And then for my PhD, what I decided to do was, going further to the idea of influence, but to the idea of, okay, this hip hop is here now. Why is this so important to us, and how is that very particular, very authentic? Because São Paulo embraced hip hop and transformed it in something else, right? And hip hop that is very particular of São Paulo. Maybe if hip hop was first started in Brazil, in Rio or in Salvador, would be totally different. São Paulo is a hard city to live. São Paulo is very, like, upfront, right? Everything is fast-paced in São Paulo. São Paulo is very segregated because it's huge, right? Some people don't even go to São Paulo downtown in their whole lives, because people say here in the US, like, because salvation here in the US, this word, oh, something saved me, can be very colloquial, very, oh, I was hungry and this saved me. No. But in Brazilian hip hop specifically, this idea of salvação, which is salvation, but I use it in Portuguese exactly to mark the difference. It's very strong because it's very associated to religion, spirituality, and etc.
Okay, so in Brazil, in America, we use this word saving. You can use it in a religious context, but in Brazil, it's mainly used in a religious context.
It's not mainly. We use in other expressions, but in hip hop, it became mainly.
Okay.
So I started to try to. I graduated. I had to remember that. So I approached this concept of salvação to understand what does that mean to us as hip hop participants. Why do we say that? Hip hop salvou minha vida. If you were not hip hop, things would be terrible. Ele salvou minha vida, because it's very, very strong, right? So I started with this question, and after I was like very bashing by committees and things, and things like that. So I understand that there is a salvationist discourse in Brazilian hip hop that not necessarily is emancipatory or is saving people, but the discourse is part of the Brazilian hip hop. A lot of this discourse is related to the notion of hip hop as activism that is still part of the Brazilian context of hip hop that came from the 90s, right? But it's still like, it's still a thing. So when hip hop in Brazil is not confrontational, it's not talking about racism, it's not like talking about like being like up front and everything, we ask. We put them on a corner and say, hey, what's up? Right? You know.
Basically, you're saying, so obviously we know that hip hop in America definitely had its moment where it was confrontational. It highlighted social issues. But right now, hip hop, and I mean, it's very difficult to find those people who are doing that right now. Hip hop is a money-making machine in America. In Brazil, you're saying that hip hop has never reached that moment where it's just pure money. It's still in this social justice element. So it's still a reflection.
I think more people are making money now, and more people are making money now, and more people are seeing that as their job, their profession. Okay. But there is no Jay-Z in Brazil. Nobody's making, no Kanye in Brazil. Nobody's making millions with hip hop in Brazil. Even big artists such as Racionais and Emicida, they have a good life, but they are not millionaires. You know, none of them. And I think mostly because the main rap music that arrived in Brazil in the 90s were like gangster rap, in a sense, more like Ice Cube and things like that, but Pac as well, Tupac and things like that. And Public Enemy at first. We were like, that became our thing, you know, because there was this need in Brazil. So the concept that I use is the concept of sampling. So Brazilian hip hop actually took American hip hop and sampled it to create our own hip hop, right? It's not even the same sound. I make a joke with the sound, but it's like, it's a different thing, you know? And there is also this comparison between American hip hop and Brazilian hip hop, saying, by Brazilians saying, we cannot be commercial like them. We cannot be sold out, right? So there is this, and partially because of the positionality that they had at first of artists such as Racionais not going to the media and things like that. And then inside that, one, I place São Paulo, right? Because there is Murray Foreman, which is an author, a hip hop scholar here in the US, and he says that hip hop take the city, so take the place where it goes. So wherever hip hop goes in the world, it's going to take the format and the it's not the format, but it's going to be part of that place. It's going to put itself according, right, to that space. So I take that idea to talk like we have a hip hop in Brazil and in São Paulo specifically, right? That came and we sampled it and we created our own hip hop. That is very, for us, is authentic, right? The notion of authenticity for this hip hop, it's exactly this activist characteristic, which I call in my research bater de frente. Então é isso, a gente bate de frente. Hip hop tem que bater de frente, right? Tem que be like up front. Let's say, you know, and we don't even give a lot of space for people to try to be creative and going. Nowadays more, but at least at first no. And the other thing is that I try to approach is like, okay, if hip hop saves, what is hip hop saving us from? What is this idea of salvation coming from? Is a religious idea? No, it's not, because people have their own religions or no religion at all. If it's not a religion, it's a political salvation. What is that? And then I try to navigate those paths. And then I ask, okay, all this idea of salvation, of a transformative movement, of being able to offer us new path, it's beautiful. And I know it's real because it did that for me in a way that showed me a world that was different than I was habituated. But why, if this movement is emancipatory, why so sexist? Why so
very sexist?
Right? And it's very sexist, even more sexist than in the US. So I started question that, like, okay, as I said, like, I didn't question hip hop. And one game that I play, it's not a game, but I create like a thing, because in Brazil, in Portuguese, we have male and female nouns and pronouns, right? And hip hop, the word hip hop in Portuguese, it's male. It's all hip hop. So in Brazil, hip hop never had a chance to be a woman. So Common in Brazil would not sing I Used to Love Her.
Interesting. I never even thought about that.
Because hip hop, it's all hip hop. And everyone in Brazil who talks about hip hop as a person talks about hip hop as a man. So I start to play with this idea of hip hop being a man, to understand this black hypersexuality and black hypermasculinity behind hip hop. There is very exclusionary of black women in general, most black women and black queer people, because my work focuses specifically on black people in hip hop, right? So black queer people, but black women in hip hop, to say, okay, if it saves, who is that saving? Because you guys are still oppressing us, turning off our mics and right. So that was my question, playing with the words in Portuguese, right, and trying to make sense of something.
And also, I just want to point out to you guys, as a part, when she finished her dissertation, she did make a hip hop album.
Actually, I wrote the lyrics as part of the dissertation. I just recorded after, but like each of those lyrics, the first two, one is a citation by Conceição Evaristo. It's an amazing writer from Brazil. The second song that you are showing there, named Além da Cor, was the first rhyme that I wrote in my life back in 2003. But all the others were songs that I wrote to open each chapter of my dissertation. So the songs follow the chapters of my dissertation. And the last song is actually the last song is actually the song that I did on my TEDx. I did a song. I rhymed on my TEDx, and I put that song in the album.
And then Danny, it's called. Well, she has on her Danny Diaspora Diaspora queen. Okay.
Gonna diaspora queen, yes, because I deserve it. Just because I can. And because Dr. Daniela Gomes would not be like INC name.
So actually, I want to get back to our audience. They have quite a few questions.
Oh my
And I'm
God.
going to have to ask you to be a little bit brief in your answers, Daniela.
Sleep.
Daniela, be brief. Be brief.
Let me just turn on the lights here because it's starting.
Okay.
Oh shit.
Okay.
Give me a sign when I am talking too much. You know I can go and go and go.
Yes, you talk.
I don't know. I'm glad I only have an hour to talk to my students, so I don't.
Okay, so Danica Toms, you actually brought this up, and I think this is the reason why she's asking. Danica Toms says, "What is the standard of beauty for Black people in Brazil?" Be brief if you can.
Oh my gosh, that's hard to say because I am from another generation. When I was growing up, I was just an ugly kid.
Mm-hmm.
Period. No reference, no Black people on TV or anything like that. I was just ugly. And that was very violent for me and for all Black women my age and even a little bit younger, right? And older than me, of course. But nowadays things are so different. We have Black women like Isa, like Chiama, like Ludmilla, so many Black women, Maju, right? The journalist, so many Black women with visibility and dark skinned Black women, right?
Mm-hmm.
That I think that's changing a little bit. And we started, especially first because of social media, we start to have more access to Black women outside of Brazil. So the beauty standards inside the Black community are changing. So they see more Black women, right, as beautiful. But there is still a colorist thing. And statistics show, and it's not my experience, because my experience, even I am light skinned, was very of loneliness and very being prepared by men, like always the friend, always, you know. But I am not like, I cannot just look to my own belly bottom and say, oh, this is how the world goes. No. So it's being light skinned. As darker you are, the chances for you to not get married, not have a romantic partner, it's harder.
Yeah.
Right. And if you are darker and you are overweight, like if you are dark and fat, that's going to be worse. And all these things that always also happening here in the US.
And actually, I guess this connects to Gertie's question. Is there a struggle when dating as a Black Brazilian due to anti-Blackness and colorism within Brazil? How does Black love thrive?
Back home?
Yeah. Connected to what you just said.
Doesn't thrive. I think a lot of people are... one thing that is different from the US, of course, as I talked at the first, is the idea of not getting married. So the beauty standard in Brazil is still white. And most Black men in Brazil, and a lot of Black women too, but most Black men in Brazil, even activist Black men, they don't want a Black women. They want a white woman. Point. Even light skin like me, they don't want that. They want a white woman. Point. Period. I think there are more people willing to change than as I was growing up, you know. To change to find Black partners, both straight and queer people trying to have that. More experiences also of non-monogamous people trying to do that. Polyamory people, a lot of terms that I don't even understand, but that they are happening, right? Is different from this new generation than it was from my generation.
And that's true. I'm in the same generation as Daniela. Living in Brazil, I felt like if I had been 10 years younger or 15 years younger, my dating
Oh,
life would have been so much better.
oh yeah. Yeah, in all aspects, because but like black men from my generation, and especially because being a late 70s, 80s baby, we are the first generation actually that men started dating interracially again, because we had that thing about cleaning the families and dating interracially, but for a lot of families were still taboo to date black people. A lot of, it's true nowadays in Brazil, a lot of families don't want their white girls dating black people, right? But we in the 80s with the pagode groups and the soccer players, with soccer becoming more popular after the 70s and everything, and more soccer players dating, like basketball players here or football players, but more soccer players dating white people, more pagode groups, pagode 90 groups dating white women, then regular guys start dating white women as well, especially in a city like São Paulo, who we have a huge poor community with white people as well. It's different from Salvador, with mostly people in the poor communities are black. In São Paulo, we have a relatively mixed low-income community.
And then Kylie got body asked, where in the U.S. did you see more parallels or feel most connected to Black American culture?
Good question. I am a stubborn person. So I feel connected everywhere because I force myself.
I'm the same way. I am actually the same way. I will force myself to be connected to everywhere. I will find something that's going to connect me to that place.
Yeah, exactly. So I had this notion of not being connected because, like in Austin, I was miserable because I was in grad school. And sorry to say that, Ed, but like pretty much my life was grad school. And Austin doesn't have black people. It's only 6% of the population, no people to date, no people, So, but I created communities. I used to go to church. I was very well received. I live in Georgia for a short amount of time, but it was a nice experience. Here in Hartford, I didn't have time to connect yet because I moved here by the end of July. The winter came, and then the pandemic. So I'm like suffering because I'm a social butterfly. I want to be out and about, whatever. But I pretty much I try to make community. I make dinners at my home. I invite people. I tell people to bring friends. I go to church. I go to parties. I go to spoken words. I try. Hartford for me has been hard. One, because of the things I said, and also because most people here hang out in New York and Boston. They go to the city to hang out. And I don't go to the city a lot because I don't have a car and other reasons, right? But I think I have a lot of friends in the Black community in the US. I know a lot of people all over the country. People that
and a lot of people know you, Daniela. Like I can drop Daniela's name and someone will know her.
And I can friends, real close friends that I can call and say, "Hey, can I come to visit you? I want to get out of Hartford. I'm bored." And they are going to receive me in their house, and I will be there as if I were in Brazil, like being part. So I am very privileged in that sense. So, but I pretty much force myself anywhere. If there is Black people, I'm going to find them.
And actually, okay, so we're wrapping up. We'll probably got like 5 to 10 more minutes. But before we end, I do want to let you guys know that we do have more conversations like these coming up. Tomorrow, we're going to be chatting with AD Jr., who is part of this new Black new media movement. So he's going to talk about Black new media in Brazil. And then on Thursday, we have Sabrina Fidalgo, who is a Black filmmaker. I mean, she is a filmmaker, but she's going to talk about being a Black filmmaker in Brazil. So pay attention to the times of these conversations. And if you just follow me at at Kiratiana, wherever I will be promoting these conversations. So we probably just have two more questions.
Sure.
My question to you is, okay, so in the
You
last
have,
6 years,
you have questions or the audience has questions?
we have one more question from the audience and one more question from me. I'm sorry.
Give the person the question first, because
Okay,
maybe
cool.
the person has to leave or something.
So here's the question. How do Black Brazilians or Brazilians of colors within favelas or wherever feel about white passing Brazilians being the face of baile funky in popular media? Oh, this is interesting.
That's an interesting question. This guy has been to Brazil, or at least like funky.
Uh-huh. This is from Gertie.
Yeah. Gertie, I live in a bubble. And this is terrible to say, but my bubble is very activist, very like not thinking like me, but pretty much same kind of background. Or people who are academics, or people who are activists, people who are already like in other spaces, right? So for us, we are like, this is terrible. Why Anita is pretending when she wants to play favela, she plays black. The other moment she plays white. Why is Anita doing that? Or anything like that. But this is my bubble. Outside of my bubble, I really don't know what people think. Because funky is a very popular movement, and that came from hip hop. This is another conversation, but it's a very popular thing everywhere. Like pretty much teenagers, they can be born in Brazil, in the US, in Colombia, in Ghana. They just want to shake their ass. So they are not concerned if Anita is black or if she pretends to be. If the music is good, they are going to do that. So of course, there are people, and I am not saying people are alienated. I want to be clear like that. I'm not trying to be like, oh, as an intellectual and activist, I know more than these people. It's not that I'm saying. What I'm saying is like there are other concerns. We just had a boy in Brazil who was murdered inside his living room. 14 years old. The police took his body without the family know, and called the next day to say, hey, he's here at the mortuary, come to see. So I think people in the favelas in Brazil, they have other things to consider than who the hell is white person and being the face of hip hop. Of course, and this is not about funky only. If you take all black popular movements in Brazil, black cultural movements in Brazil, they were whitewashed. Samba, bossa nova, hip hop.
Especially once it reaches a monetary, like if there's money involved with it, some white folks are gonna get some of that money.
Axé music, right, which is pagode da Bahia, sertanejo. They were all whitewashed. This is not new. This is not new at all. So funk is just one more, hip hop less, because the activist content and because the 90s artists were very reluctant to go to the media, and that they paid the price for that. Some of them, the groups ended, some of them starved. So, but all the other rhythms. So it's not new at all. And I just think that people who live in the favelas, or even who just live in the periferia, they have other concerns. Like they are not even concerned about COVID-19. So, right.
Cool. So my last question is, okay, in the last 6 years, I've seen a massive growth of young Black activism. Why didn't we see this massive growth during your generation?
Okay, you have to be very cautious. What I'm saying? No, it's not bad. It's just like I want to solve pretensions. There is a gap, like until the 70s, when the Black movement was created, right, and all the movements before. One, we didn't have as much as information as we have now, period. But also the movements, the Black social movements in Brazil were very restricted to people who are activists,
Mm.
right? It was not spread out. It's not, as I said, we didn't learn at school.
Mhm.
Nobody was debating that. If you were part, you were part. If you were not, you were not.
Mhm.
Then we have a generation, which is the hip hop generation, right?
Mhm.
That it started to take people like me and other people older than me, tell
Mhm.
us about blackness and empower us in a political way. When I say political, not political parties, but like more activist way, right? More and
Mhm.
more. If you take people my generation, if you talk to Davison, if you talk to Guilherme that you interviewed, uh, also about hip hop, and other people in their 30s, 40s, mostly was through hip hop.
Mhm.
Some of them were already no, they already knew they were black, but like didn't know anything about black movement. And with
Mhm.
hip hop, that boom, because also we had posses in Brazil, and those hip hop posses were like spaces where they could go to debate, right? And
Mhm.
then these messages, because the black movement really helped to forge the activist part of hip hop, the
Mhm.
message became popular in a language that people could understand, even if they didn't have it formal education.
Mhm.
Then we have later in the 2000s one social media,
Mhm.
a massive information of looks and things like that coming from the West to Brazil through
Black
social
hair.
media,
Mhm.
like Afro hair,
Mhm.
makeup, and things like that. And then we have like a generation of people who are self-called empowered, who are
Mhm.
pretty much, in most cases, kids that are sons and daughters of my generation and the generation a little bit before me, because I'm 38, so I could pretty much have a child with 20
Mhm.
years. That would be 18, let's say,
Mhm.
right? So those kids are uh, kids of this hip hop generation of the 80s and 90s, right?
Mhm.
And like they already got the message from their parents or from anyone who knew. The
Mhm.
denounce of racism was already there. They have access to higher education because of the quotas that came in the early 2000s. And they
Mhm.
have social media and the whole hair movement, natural hair, change. They only can conquer the moon. They are actually late. I would be like Mars right now if I had all that information.
Mhm.
Right? Like if I didn't have anything, if I didn't have any information about blackness, and I am
Mhm.
here with 38 years old. Imagine if I was
Mhm.
like a teenager now or a young adult on my 19s, like on my teens. I would be Mars. So I think it's a mix, but it's also problematic because a lot
Mhm.
of important discussions
Mhm.
that demand time and information, not only through books. I read, and I read before I was in academia. I read since I was a child,
Mhm.
so I like to read. But it's not only about that, but it's like a lot of people just inform themselves through Facebook, through WhatsApp.
Oh gosh, don't get me started.
Yes. So what I'm trying to say is like a lot of topics that are very deep that we need to go there and invest time to learn, like colorism,
Mhm.
like other thing that people, black feminism,
Mhm.
colorism, black feminism, like Afrocentricity,
Mhm.
interracial marriage, and other topics that are
Mhm.
deep that we have to go careful to talk about, to
Mhm.
learn, to see what is really behind, what is the message, because of the uh, how instantaneous social media is. They just take it and they
Mhm.
scream, and
Mhm.
then like,
Mhm.
and then a lot of it then become a snowball, and a lot of misconceptions happen, and
Mhm.
you who are like old from an old generation, you just look at us and so why where is that coming from? How did they get it?
Mm-hmm.
And
I'm going to be honest with you. Given that there is this instantaneous information, and sometimes people aren't going directly to the sources of the information as much, I do find in general that Afro-Brazilians who embrace Blackness are much more learned about Blackness or the diaspora than I would say in America in general. What do you think? I don't. I mean, I just feel like in America, we were born Black, so we don't necessarily feel the need to, per se, pursue studies of Blackness. Whereas I find that because Afro-Brazilians have to kind of become Black, and oftentimes they find themselves seeking out this information more than the average Black American person.
But the thing is, who are the Black Brazilians you are talking about?
Yeah, I'm talking about a very specific group of Black Brazilians.
Because again, and that's, I told you before we started, like, I have tried to pull myself back to understand I live in a bubble.
And I live in a bubble
and
too.
You live it in the same bubble that I like. We just changed the bubble.
And when I get back to Brazil, because I'm getting back to Brazil, one of my goals in like the last half of the year is to really get out of this bubble. I've been in this bubble because it's comfortable, and people welcome me, but I need to push myself outside of this bubble and meet Black people who aren't the activists.
And if you meet Black people, you are going to talk. It's the same thing. The regular Black person from Brazil and the regular Black person from the US. And when am I talking about, especially poor Black people, working class Black people, they are concerned about their paychecks.
Mm-hmm.
If the governmental support for COVID-19 is going to come to their account.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have time to be debating. Like, it's not that they don't know they are Black. Some of them, of course, know. Some of them have tradition. Some of them, like, know what racism means by, like, living it. But all this conversation, this information, my search, come on. No, it's not that even people are not interested. It's like that. It's not part of the reality. And this is one thing that is a challenge for everyone who is still here, for you, for me. We need to learn how to communicate. Our messages are not communicating to our people. And it's not about, like, I cannot be an intellectual. I am in academia. Nobody's going to read this shit. That's the truth. And I will speak, I'm sorry, excuse my French, but that's the truth. How do I communicate? How do I use a language? I was talking to someone, to a friend, and he said to me, oh, you talk as if you were giving a lecture. And I was like, oh, sorry, it was not my intention. I didn't even realize, like, so, okay, am I talking to people as if I was giving a lecture? Am I using words that people can understand? Like, people in the daily life. Like, if I talk something, for me, my thermometer now, just too close, if I say something, my aunt is going to understand. My neighbor is going to understand. The person that I know, if I explain, the person that I know that is out of my bubble, a teenager in a public school, is this person going to understand me? If they understand what I am saying, so, okay, keep going. If they don't, I am doing something wrong. Preta Rara, Joyce Preta Rara.
Oh, I love her. Oh my gosh,
She's an amazing rapper from Brazil. She's a historian and dark-skinned Black woman, fat, fighting against fat phobia. Excuse me, very dark-skinned. And she has a project named Eu Empregada Doméstica. So me, the domestic worker. Right? And she selected testimonies of Black women who have been working as domestic workers, and she created a book. Her project is amazing. But why I'm mentioning Preta Rara right now? Because Preta Rara created a TikTok during the quarantine. As all of us, and if you guys are not there, I suggest you go to TikTok. TikTok having fun, because it's what adults are doing now. And she created a TikTok, and she realized that, and this is, I think, for us who are working in communication, Kiratiana, to know our audience. The audience of Facebook is not the audience of Twitter. That is not the audience of Instagram. That is not of the audience of TikTok.
Yep.
So she saw that TikTok is full of children and teenagers. So she created her TikTok where she does silly dances as everybody else, and she starts sharing messages in 15 seconds ways that they can understand. And those teens and kids are contacting her.
Oh, wow.
And trying to know more.
She's an educator too. She's an educator, so she knows.
Yeah, she's a historian. She used to work as a teacher. She's an educator. So she's talking to this like kids on TikTok. And she's talking serious things. She's not like, she plays, but she is educating them in a certain way. And she said that her mission is to share a message in a way that they are going to get it. That's it. That for me is it. Create your TikTok, guys.
So, okay, we've been on here 2 hours, but we still have 18 people on here, but we still got to go.
Oh, guys, thank you.
2 hours. Woo! Wow. So, any lasting, I guess my this is not a thoughtful question, but any other people we should read, any other people we should follow? Like, just throw out some names you think we should get to know or know, and I will list them in the comments for people to look up.
Pritahara is one.
Okay.
Let me think. Ade Jr. is a nice guy. He speaks English. He's going to be here with you. I like Tia Ma. Tia Ma talks a lot of good things as well. From hip hop, Emicida, Rashid, Tássia Reis, Carol Conká. Who else? Let me think. Isa, for those who like pop music. Isa is a nice person to follow. Who else? I'm trying to think about content that would get attention. Winnie Bueno on Twitter, the creator of the Winnieteca. Cecilia Oliveira from Rio. She's a journalist. She's always posting things, more serious things about information. She's also Black. Ale Santos. He posts things about Black Brazilian history.
Oh, what is his name?
Ale Santos. His nickname is Savage Fiction.
Savage Fiction.
Yeah.
Oh, wow, okay.
On Twitter. And he just released a book. Rodrigo, what is the name of Rodrigo? Rodrigo
Franca?
Rodrigo França.
Okay, França, I think, yeah.
Yeah, Rodrigo França is a nice person to follow as well. Yuri Marçal, who is funny, he's a comedian, but he does a very good social critic as well. Roger Cipó.
Oh my gosh, he's been having these. What is it called?
Tinder, the Black Tinder. Roger Cipó, nice person to hear, especially talking about. He has been talking a lot about Black masculinities. My friend Luana Galdino, she's nice. She's a Black activist as well. She put some kind of reflections for people to think. Who else in Brazil I like to follow? I'm trying to think. But I think those names are fine for now. Yeah. And another thing is follow me on social media, because all these people are there. Everyone, I pretty much, as I said, I live in a bubble, so pretty much follow.
Oh, actually, I even made a banner. Here we go.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, this is for all my social media, except for TikTok. But it's Daniela Gomes PAD, Gomes with S, because it's in Portuguese. Even for Facebook, no, for Facebook, because it's still journalista Daniela Gomes, but you can find me. And from my account, you are going to see I follow most of these people that I mentioned. These are amazing people, and as I said, I live pretty much in a bubble, so hold there. Especially during those political times, I deleted everybody who didn't go the same direction to save my emotional being. And that's it. And thank you for the interview. It was nice, you know.
No, thank you, Daniela. Like, thank you so much. Yeah, thank you. Like, I want to see you in person. When was the last time we saw each other in person?
Pandemic go away, and then we can travel. You can come to Hartford, or I can go to Chicago.
Yes.
And please, if you guys have any questions, send me a message, or Kiratiana can write my email here. You guys can send me an email. It will be my pleasure to answer or indicate any other readings that you guys can read. Okay, I like to.
And also, this video will be on YouTube, so you can go back and watch it, take it all in. When I go back to the videos, I don't edit it, but I do just kind of make sure I can do a summary so people will know what the interview was all about. So look on the website, YouTube, Kiratiana, for this interview. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
2 hours, 2.5 hours. Bye.
Bye.